Now that I have a 1 here, I'd like to get a 0 underneath it. So the row 3 I have is no good. I got to replace row 3 with -7 row 2 plus row 3. So I'm keeping the row 1, -1, 3, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, -8/5, 1/5, -3/5, 0. Alright, so I'm going to multiply all these by -7 and add them to these guys. So -7 times 0 plus 0 is 0. -7 times 1 plus 7 is 0. And here's the tricky one. -7 times -8/5. Well, that's 56/5. Add that to -17. So I'm subtracting 17. So that's 56/5 minus, how many fifths is 17? Well, 50 plus 35 is 85. And what's 56 minus 85? Well, 56 and 20 gets me to 76 and 9, so it'd be -29/5. -7/5 plus 0, that's -7/5. -7 times 3/5, or excuse me, -7 times -3/5 is 21/5. And I got to add that to -2. This looks a lot like -21, but it's really -2 and then 1. So let me fix that. So that's 21/5 minus 10/5, so that's 11/5. And -7 times 0 plus 1 is 1. Alright, so I have a 1 in the upper left-hand corner, 0's underneath it. I've got a 1 here with a 0 underneath it. Now I need to get a 1 here. So I'm going to replace row 3 with, I'm going to divide row 3 by -29/5, so I'm going to multiply it by -5/29. So row 1 I've kept the same, 1, -1, 3, 0, 1, 0. Row 2 I've kept the same, 0, 1, -8/5, 1/5, -3/5, 0. Multiply 0 times anything, I'm going to get 0. Same thing here. This gives me a 1. Multiplying by -5 over 29 gives me -7 over 29. This gives me -11 over 29. And this gives me -5 over 29. So I'm going to oops, still not enough room. So -5 over 29. Alright, so I've got my zeros here. Now I'm going to start working backwards. Starting with this one, I'm going to wipe out what's above it. And then I'll use this one to wipe out what's above it. Okay, so starting with this one, to kill off what's above it, I've got to multiply this by 8/5 and add it. So I'm going to replace row 2 with 8/5, row 3 plus row 2, and I'm going to replace row 1 with -3, row 3 plus row 1. So that's going to get me zeros above that. Okay, well, before we proceed here, I noticed a typo. This should not be a negative 7/29. It should be a positive 7/29. So make sure you record that correction. And we'll go ahead and proceed with the row operations. So row 3 I'm keeping the same. 0, 0, 1. 7/29, negative 11/29, negative 5/29. And, alright, I'm going to multiply this row by 8/5 and add it to row 2. So when you multiply by 0, you just get 0, and I add it. And so notice by doing this, I'm not messing up the pattern I have up here. When I multiply this by 8/5 and add it, I get the 0 that I want. When I multiply this by 8/5, in the numerator I'm going to get 56, and in the denominator I'm not going to multiply that out yet because I'm hoping something will cancel. And I have to add that to 1/5. So I'm going to have to get a common denominator to the 1/5. So I'm going to multiply by 29 over 29. So when you do this, you get 56 plus 29, and what's that going to be? Well, 56 and 20 is 76, and then you add 9 to that, you're going to get 85. So, miracle of miracles, I got a 5 that goes into the 85, and 5 goes into 85 17 times. So this is 17/29. Okay, now I got to multiply this guy by 8/5 and add it to that guy. Alright, so multiply the numerator there by 8. I get negative 88. And I'm going to remain optimistic about the denominator and not multiply it out just yet. And I'm going to be adding it to this guy. It's a negative. And so as before, I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 29 over 29, and hopefully something will cancel out. So when I multiply the 3 times 29, 3 times 20 is 60, 9 times 3 is 27, so that gives me 87 on the top. And these are both negative, so let's see, 88 and 80 would be 168, and add 7 to that. 168 and 7 is 175. And once again, the numerator is divisible by 5. If I take 5 into 175, what am I going to get? Well, it goes in 30 times, 35 times. So I get 35 over 29 for that slot. And the last multiplication, mercifully, is a little easier. When I multiply him by 8/5, the 5's cancel out. I just get negative 8/29, and I'm adding adding that to 0. And so that'll give me the new row 2. Okay, so to get the new row 1, I'm multiplying each of these guys by 8/5 and then adding it back into row 1. Excuse me. I'm multiplying each of these guys by negative 3 and then adding them back into row 1. You take negative 3 times 0, add that to 1, you get 1. Negative 3 times 0, add that to negative 1, you get negative 1. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3 plus 3, and that's the 0 we were after. You multiply this by negative 3, you get negative 21 over 29. Add it to 0, you get negative 21 over 29. You multiply him by negative 3, and you get a 33 over 29. And you got to add that to 1, which I'll write as 29 over 29. So 33 and 20 gives you 53. Add 9, you get 62. So 62 over 29. And you multiply him by -3, you get 15 over 29. Add that to 0. And it's 15 over 29.